Welcome everyone to tonight's meeting of the Services Delegated Committee. Before we commence the meeting, I request that all mobile telephones are turned off or switched to silent. Thank you. The Services Delegated Committee meeting is being live streamed on the Council website, so you'll be able to view the proceedings of the meeting, councillor deliberations and voting. The meeting's also being recorded and will be made available on the Council website as soon as practicable after the meeting. Should technical problems be encountered during the meeting will be adjourned until the problem is rectified, or if needed, the meeting will be postponed. My name is Councillor Jane Addis, Chair of this committee. I'll start by introducing my fellow councillors and officers. Seated to my left at the horseshoe table in the council chamber are Councillor Jim Park, Councillor Susan Bigger, Councillor Cynthia Watson, Councillor Nick Stavrou, Councillor Felicity Sinfield, and on the opposite side we have Councillor Lisa Hollingsworth, Councillor Wes Galt, Councillor Di Gillies, the Mayor, Councillor Gary Thompson, and Councillor Victor Franco. Sorry, I was just checking the people in the officers in attendance. So look, I'll go to the officers in attendance. So to my immediate right, we have Philip Storer, Chief Executive Officer. To my left and behind Councillor Stavrou, we have Carolyn McLean, Director Community Support, and David Shepherd, Acting Director Places and Spaces. And then to my right and behind Councillor Gillies, we have Sharan Wickramasinghe, Director Urban Living, and Sam Taylor, who is, Senior Coordinator Sports and Recreation, thank you. To my immediate left, we have David Thompson, Manager Governance and Legal, and Elizabeth Manu, Senior Governance Officer, and there are also other staff members in attendance this evening to assist us. The purpose of the Services Delegated Committee is to deal with issues relating to the provision of human services and physical services and Council's infrastructure. For those in the gallery presenting this evening, when we come to the agenda item, it will be introduced by an officer, and I'll then call on you one by one to come forward and address Council. When making a submission, you are requested to present your viewpoint clearly and concisely on why you agree or disagree with the proposal. You may also suggest an alternative approach which could satisfy your concerns. If you could please not repeat what other speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues. There is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, and that does include councillors. I'll ask speakers to come to the lectern and we'll invite those against the item to speak first, followed by those in favour. At the 2.5 minute mark, I'll ring the bell, which will indicate that you have 30 seconds remaining, and if you could please conclude your presentation. And then after you've spoken, if you could please remain standing while I check if any councillor has a question for you. So we'll now move to apologies. Mr Thompson, are there any apologies for this evening?
Through you, Madam Chair, there are no apologies for this evening.
Thank you very much. Adoption and confirmation of the minutes of the Services Delegated Committee meeting held on 19 April 2021. Councillors, could I have a motion to adopt and confirm the minutes of the Services Delegated Committee meeting held on 19 April 2021. And Councillor Thompson, I think.
Happy to move the minutes.
Thank you very much. And do we have a seconder, Councillor Stavry?
Happy to second.
Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, is anyone opposed to the motion? Thank you. So I'll move to the mover to check if you'd like to speak to the motion.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Happy that the motion's put.
Thank you. So I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. The next item is declaration of conflict of interest of any councillor or council officer. Councillors and council officers, are there any conflicts of interest that need to be declared? I can't see any, thank you. So we'll proceed to the next item. So presentation of officer reports. Item 3.1 is potential acquisition of 28 Guildford Road, Surrey Hills, and Andrew McHugh, Manager Health and Wellbeing Services, will present that to us. Thank you, Mr McHugh.
Thank you, Chair. The Canterbury Tennis Club is a very popular and well-managed club. The club has requested Council consider acquiring a property situated at 28 Guildford Road, Surrey Hills, in order for an additional court to be built adjacent to existing tennis courts used by the club. The property is currently for sale, and although the timeframes are short, key information has been compiled for Council to assist in its consideration. The report outlines the demand for tennis in the surrounding areas, Council's strategic direction, site constraints of the property in question, zoning requirements, traffic and parking implications, and implications on Council's budget should it wish to purchase the property. Having outlined these factors for Council's consideration, officers have recommended not to purchase the site due to uncertainty about the outcome of a rezoning request, uncertainty about the outcome of a planning permit application for court lighting. The dimensions of the court may be less than the required width, potentially meaning competition cannot be played on this court. The ability of some nearby clubs to absorb additional use. The Boroondara open space strategy and sport and recreation strategy do not provide a key direction to support the purchase. And 2 trees identified as high retention value would need to be removed. Officers appreciate the club bringing this matter to our attention, and we provide this recommendation for Council's consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr McHugh. We have 3 speakers wishing to make submissions on this item. If I could start by calling Mr Philip J forward. And if you could please state your name and address and interest in the matter and whether you're for or against the officer's recommendation.
Sure. My name is Philip J. I'm the president at Canterbury Tennis Club. My residential address is 18 Salisbury Avenue in Blackburn. I support the recommendation. That's a bit painful, but I've read the report. And I have to thank Sam for his turnaround on this. We saw the auction date. We hurriedly wrote an email, and this is much more research into it than we could have hoped for. It's wonderful. Thank you for that. The trees were a blind spot for us. It wouldn't be good to lose those trees. And I acknowledge that we're building, if we were to purchase it, we would be building a club in 1920, having 2 big gum trees between the courts, probably not acceptable. So without the pressure of an upcoming auction, I just hope to continue to work with the council. We've had a really good relationship with the council. We have a fantastic new pavilion. And so we can see where we could go from here. I really like seeing the report because it now gives me a great understanding of what goes into these sort of decisions. One thing for me with in the report is the number of courts to possibly absorb tennis playing capacity. I understand the council's perspective. Those are your assets and they're all spread out over the council area. The club perspective is is a bit funnier because we're sort of reading that as, in the current AFL environment, oh, sorry, Richmond supporters, you can't get a seat at a game. Why don't you support North Melbourne instead? So we'd actually like some help to perhaps sweat the assets, so to speak. I don't know whether there could be a central register of all the leased clubs and where there could be capacity for clubs to swap court usage or something like that, as well as if there are any other potential expansions for the tennis club. I will just also say to the report, it possibly downplays or avoids the impact of the Boroondara Tennis Centre closing for the North East Link project. I worry, I probably don't have time in 3 minutes to explain it, but the clubs in the report where we list the court ratios predominantly all play in inter-club competition across the Blackburn District Night Tennis Association if they've got lights, or Eastern Region, which is played on the weekend, whereas the Boroondara Tennis Centre played intra-club things or centre competitions and had tournaments. The players that are used to regularly playing there will have to start to understand how these other clubs work, and so some thought will have to be put in how that centre is closed down and the players educated about where else they could play. And it pains me to say, well, Canterbury are stuck, we're at capacity, so we won't be able to help there, but I am concerned about the tennis playing capability in the City Council. So thank you for your time, and thanks, Sam, for the work.
Thank you. Councillors, Councillor Watson, you have a question for Mr Jay?
Yes, I do. Thank you for your presentation, and many of the concerns you've raised are something I'm quite familiar with. We haven't met, but I play up at Greythorn Park, so and I've also played down at Canterbury, and very familiar with many of your players. It's common for tennis clubs to hire additional courts when they're, as you are, and have it very adequately described as at capacity. I would say probably beyond capacity, but that's just my view. Could you please explain what you have done to acquire additional courts? And I'm asking you this question because I have recently spoken to one of your members who said that those additional courts are no longer available to you. Is that correct? And what plans do you have?
We've yet to finalise upcoming seasons. So I'll talk to what's happened in the past. We have expressions of interest for teams. Existing teams want to continue into next seasons, and if new teams want to form, we ring other clubs, not only in Boroondara but also Whitehorse, and we see if they have capacity to host our teams. So their home matches would be played away at an alternative club. Baldwin Park was actually, let's say, a favourite for playing there, and the numbers in the report are a little bit out of date now. So Baldwin Park is also enjoying a new pavilion and new courts. They've probably doubled their membership numbers as to what's in the report. And so they're starting to feed back to us. They're not sure how long they can keep hosting our home teams away at their courts. So we continue to also have relationships with Deepdean, North Box Hill, which is over in Whitehorse. North Box Hill are also starting to get a bit toey. They also host some Box Hill teams at their courts. So really it's on the, we're all volunteers, the volunteer organisers of the competitions who enter the teams to just be ringing around other club presidents to see what's possible. So why I mentioned if there was a central register or some other assistance maybe, that could streamline the process of finding courts that are available to host home teams away.
Yes, please.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. If you mentioned going to other clubs, which are public facilities, as it were, are there any problems with going to some of the churches who have private courts and hiring arrangements with them?
We've tried particularly with, I forget the exact name of it. Anyway, there's 2 courts nearby. They're not lit, so it would only work for weekend competition. But essentially, they're not interested in doing that. They're serving their own constituents, being able to play on those courts, rather than having a set competition time where they wouldn't be able to use the courts.
Thank you. And Councillor Hollingsworth, you have a question for Mr Jay?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Mr Jay, thank you for your presentation. Your comments have been very pragmatic, and thank you for acknowledging the officer's time and commitment to producing the report. When you say you're at capacity, and I know very little about tennis other than what I watch on TV, I presume you're talking about opportunity to play during the day for those that are available weekdays. You've considered daytime options as well as twilight options.
So the capacity sort of that you could actually play during the day socially. There is courts available usually. Out of our 4, maybe 2 are used on average throughout the day. Capacity relates to the ability to enter competition teams, and the competition times are set throughout the week. So from 7 o'clock at night on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then there's the Eastern Region weekend tennis. So that's juniors in the morning and seniors in the afternoon on both Saturday and Sunday. So we have limited option to move those competition times to, Monday at midday, for example. It also relates to the coaching. So we have a club coach, and he's coaching in, I guess, what you'd think is fairly normal times for a tennis coach, so after school period. We allocate 3 of the 4 courts for coaching. He would love to have the 4th court as well, but we keep that open for members, which does get used at that time as well. So the capacity really relates to those times that you can't shift the usage because tennis students are at school or that sort of thing. We don't have we only have 1 midweek ladies team, so there is a midweek ladies comp, but that participation rate has dropped off in recent years.
Thank you. May I have a follow-up question?
Yep.
Thank you. So with the hours stipulated for comp, is that done by the peak body, or do you have some flexibility within the club if there was an ability to hold more events during the week? Is it something that if those in comp were available at that time? So
that is set by the Blackburn District Night Tennis Association. They don't play Fridays, and so Canterbury, along with 3 other clubs, so Deepdean, North Balwyn, and the other one escapes me, apologies to the other club, have run Friday night social inter-club sort of a friendlier comp. There's no trophies, just come along and pay $2 and play on the Friday nights. So we kind of do make use of the time when the Blackburn District are not running night competition as well.
Right. Look, thank you for that. I was just curious if there was capacity for future planning. Thank you.
No worries.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr Jay, and officers will provide some answers when we've heard from the speakers. If you'd like to return to your seat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'd like to call on Mr Alan Walker, please. And again, for the record, if you could please state your name, address and interest in the matter and whether you're for or against the officer's recommendation.
My name's Alan Walker. I live at 27 Croydon Road, which is right next door to the Canterbury Tennis Club. It is on my west boundary, and I am for the recommendation as it stands to not continue with the purchase of the property.
Thank you.
My reasons being, or my wife and my reasons, first of all, I'd like to thank the Canterbury Tennis Club's president for actually supporting the recommendation, which was a bit of a surprise before I came, not expecting that. But I will read out my notes and go from there. First of all, there's two predominant issues, one relating to the nighttime usage of an increased tennis footprint, and that is to do with the floodlighting that is necessary for night tennis, obviously. At the moment, the floodlights are predominantly semi-shaded by the council's own pet trees that run between my property and the lights, but that only extends not quite to the back corner, and any additional lighting across the back fence directly at the rear would just be completely light up the backyard and straight into the house. The second concern is at the daytime, looking out, and it's to do with the trees that the President has mentioned. The amenity there with the trees, if they go, we'll be just looking at basically nothing, and as well as the necessity of erecting a cyclone type fence which will run along the back boundary there, and that's what we'll be just looking at rather than currently nothing that's there. Now, just as generally, an extra courts will be increasing the noise level just during daytime and nighttime, and just generally the noise just increases and will be exposed on two of the boundaries, two different points of noise generation. So that's pretty much, apart from other minor things, that's pretty much the reasons for our opposition to the purchase. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker. I can't see any lights on for questions, so if you'd like to return to your seat, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Grace Yu, if you'd like to make your way forward. And again, if you could please give us your name and address and interest in the matter and whether or not you're for or against the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Grace. I live in 30 Guildford Road, Surrey Hills. So actually, we share a significant length of 50 metres of boundary with this property we were in discussion tonight. So I do want to raise, while I appreciate the challenge of the tennis club of capacity issues, I do want to also raise awareness about our concern of this potential acquisition. So therefore, we actually support the council recommendation not to proceed with the acquisition. So I think our concern mainly with three areas. The first is that changing the nature of this property from residential to sports and recreation have significant impact on noise level because as mentioned by another neighbour just now, I think for both nighttime and daytime, the residential level of noise versus sports recreation level of noise is quite different. And sometimes also the tennis club have some celebrations and parties that they have some significant impact to our household. So the second is actually about the light pollution. Because there are very little tall trees between 28 Guildford Road and 30 with my property, Guildford Road. So the spotlight for tennis court will be very bright for our backyard. Think about we share 50 metres of boundary. That's quite significant. The third point I want to make is about, because there's very little tree, actually the dust level will be quite high as well, because this court is actually not rubber court, it's actually clay court. So we'll probably anticipate there's some increasing level of dust in our backyard. I think therefore, I would like to express my support to the council recommendation not to proceed the acquisition. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. I can't see any lights on for questions, so if you'd like to return to your seat, thank you. So we'll now go back to Mr McHugh to respond to any comments made by the presenters. Thank you, Mr McHugh.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to acknowledge the speakers and thank them for their time. Probably the main point I'd like to make is that appreciate the suggestion from the President of the Canterbury Tennis Club to look at a centralised lease and look at how we can manoeuvre opportunities for clubs to access courts more easily. That hasn't been the subject of this report, so we haven't considered it for tonight, but happy to take that on notice and see if there's anything we can do there to make it easier for clubs to access courts. The nature of tennis clubs and all sports clubs is that they fluctuate, and even as mentioned, the Ball and Park tennis clubs increased quite a bit recently since Booker Court and since Council spent some money investing in that pavilion. So it is very difficult to just add assets on when clubs are experiencing growth, because by virtue they also can go the other way as well. But very much appreciate the thoughts that were offered. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, are there any questions for officers? Councillor Sinfield, no?
No, not a question.
A motion when you're... No, just light on by mistake. Okay, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yes, just a question for Mr McHugh. The central register idea of working with clubs and memberships, it's certainly one that has a lot of appeal to me. Could you perhaps talk about a little bit of how we could actually achieve that, or is that a question you'd perhaps take on notice?
I think to give the suggestion due consideration, it probably needs to be taken on notice and worked through appropriately. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Park.
Just one question. This exercise, did it, given the displacement of tennis courts because of the North East Link, I wonder if there are any surprises about the value of a tennis court and the replacement of one, or did this exercise just confirm what officers had previously thought about that?
When you say value, do you mean community benefit value or price
No,
value?
I'm speaking financially.
Financially. Through you, Madam Chair. I think that we have always known the cost of buying land in Boroondara is a way of creating additional open space, whether it's open in the sense of it being space upon which people can gain access at will, or whether it's in the form of a sporting activity like tennis, is going to be a very, very expensive proposition. And unfortunately, the way in which these things are negotiated when you're dealing with an organisation like North East Link and the closure of the Boroondara Tennis Centre is that it is the value of that land which becomes the point of discussion, not the value of acquiring land to replace it. So, and that's a legal approach to the question. So I wish it were otherwise, because I'm sure that council would be compensated to a much higher and a more practical degree. It would be my observation.
Thank you. I also foreshadow a motion, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Park. Are there any other questions for officers? It doesn't look like it. So, Councillor Park, I think it's time for your motion.
Then I move the officer's recommendation, Chair.
Thank you very much. And do we have a seconder, Councillor Thompson?
I'm happy to second that motion.
Thank you. For the benefit of the mover and the seconder, do we have anyone opposed to the motion? No? Thank you. So, look, I'll go back to Councillor Park as the mover to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. I think the case for this motion is very eloquently laid out on page 3 of the report, and so I won't restate that. I'd just like to acknowledge the presentation by Canterbury Tennis Club, and it's refreshing actually to hear an honest and sort of heartfelt response to something rather than simply, taking a more egocentric approach. I was quite pleased to hear that, and that's certainly a little bit rarer, but it's I think great to see. I guess it's my hope that this report didn't cause too much angst for residents, but obviously council does need to explore these opportunities. They arise comparatively rarely, and we do need to go through a process which sometimes will cause a little bit of angst, but I think what we're about to achieve is the right outcome, and we just need to continue looking for appropriate ways forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson is the seconder.
Just very briefly, Madam Chair, recognising that you're the ward councillor, I'm happy for you to maybe say a few words if you're comfortable.
Okay, thank you very much. So look, thank you to all the presenters. It's been an interesting process, this one, where I think many of us started off in a position of great support for the proposal by the tennis club, but through the journey and the work that officers have put in and the commitment we've all had to genuinely trying to determine whether this will work, in the recognition that the tennis club does have a lot of members and would benefit from another court. But through that process, I think we came to realise that while Surrey Hills does need more tennis facilities, that this wasn't going to work. We value our trees and must, I think, support the preservation of them. There was also an interest in whether this could perhaps be open space, should it not be suitable for a tennis court, but well, that was my interest. But I think, again, there might be better things we can provide for Surrey Hills, in the recognition that Surrey Hills is relatively short of open space. But we do have a big project coming up with the level crossing project, and perhaps the need to try and create some open space in that project. So again, I wanted to thank the tennis club and to echo Councillor Park's words that we really appreciate having clubs that are reasonable and look after their community, and I think care for the whole community in being reasonable about how council allocates its funds. So thank you all for being involved, and we will work with the club as best as we can to try to satisfy the clear need you've demonstrated to us. So I'll hand back to Councillor Park. No, nothing more to say. So thank you for that. So look, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Thank you. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. So our next item is general business. Councillors, are there any items of general business? No. Urgent business? Councillors, are there any items of urgent business? Thank you. No. Confidential business? No. Thank you. So we can now move to close the meeting. So look, if I could thank all of those in the gallery for their attendance. And before we close the meeting, I want to thank all of you who have joined us online this evening, and wish you and your family very good health. And I declare the Services Delegated Committee closed at 9:05. Thank you very much.